Zulrah has one of the steepest learning curves of any boss in the game, and it is very difficult to learn. Most people take dozens of tries, if not even 50 plus, maybe even 100 plus tries before they even get 1 KC. So I promise you, you are not alone in struggling to learn Zulrah. Pretty much every single person has to go through that process of struggling and learning. What makes it so difficult is that it's mainly about memorization. Even the best player in the game can't beat Zulrah first try with no help, because it's not intuitive like some other bosses are. And at the end of the day, it really just comes down to repetition and memorizing the 4 patterns until it eventually gets to the point of becoming muscle memory. When you want to learn something new, I always strongly encourage you to watch a variety of guides and use the accumulation of knowledge you learn to form your own opinions, try different things, and figure out what methods work best for you personally. It's very important to know about this video that the title is phrased very specifically as how to learn Zulrah rather than how to kill Zulrah. This is because every guide on YouTube already tells you about the gear, how to get there, they run through multiple complete fights, and so on. 99% of you have probably already watched multiple Zulrah guides, but in case you haven't, I'm letting you know right now this is not that kind of gameplay guide. This is more about setting up the fundamentals on how to go about learning Zulrah. I'm not saying this is the best method or that it'll work for everyone. This is just what worked for me and helped me to learn Zulrah, and maybe parts of what I share will help some of you too in one way or another. I now have over 7,000 KC across my accounts, and it's one of my favorite bosses in the game, so hopefully that qualifies me to share my tips. And with that said, let's get started. The first thing to know is that there's 4 different Zulrah patterns, and to find these rotations, you can search Zulrah patterns or Zulrah rotations in Google Images. They're basically all the same, so you can just find whatever format you like best, or find an interactive one that lets you pick your rotation in real time and will isolate the rotation that you get. The other option, which I'd recommend more, is for RuneLite users. Go to the plugin hub and search Zulrah and install the Zulrah plugin. This is simply the interactive rotation chart, except it's built into the sidebar of RuneLite. Jagex doesn't allow dynamic tile markers, so there's no plugin that could show you where to stand and when to move in the actual game. This plugin is just the interactive chart on the sidebar. Now, taking a look at the 4 rotations, you'll see that Zulrah's first phase is the same every time. And when I say phase, I'm referring to the square of this rotation, so I'll call the second square the second phase. And when Zulrah gets to the second phase, that's when you'll know what rotation you got, either the mage rotation, the range rotation, or one of the 2 melee rotations. But with the melee rotation, you won't know for sure which of the 2 you got until the 4th phase. The biggest tip that helped me learn Zulrah is just pick one rotation and stick with that one until you learn it and can do it consistently. Maybe not until you have it memorized necessarily, but until you can do it consistently. This will prevent you from having to shuffle around on the sidebar trying to pick out the right rotation, which can be hard to do in the moment when you're at Zulrah. Next question is, which one should be the first rotation that you learn? The mage one is the hardest for a few reasons, but you take a lot of damage during that one, so just don't make it your first one. With the melee rotations, you'll have to wait longer to see if you got the right rotation because you won't know until phase 4 rather than phase 2, and that could add a lot of time when learning. So my recommendation is to start with the range rotation. Besides not having to wait as long, I think it's the easiest rotation in general, so that kind of works out perfectly. You're gonna have the range rotation up and ready to go on the side. You go in, run to the starting spot, and start hitting the boss. When Zulrah goes under the water, that's what signifies the next phase, but at the start, Zulrah is always going to be in the middle and green, just like this. I always keep my camera facing south here, and since pretty much all the rotation charts are also facing that way, I feel like it makes the most sense. So after Zulrah goes under the water, you'll be looking for it to appear on the left side and be green. If that doesn't happen, like in this case, we got a blue Zulrah on the left side, that means it's the mage rotation, you're going to hop worlds, or you can log out, but you're going to have to log back in anyways, so may as well hop. To hop worlds quickly, there's a plugin called World Hopper. I believe it's a default plugin, but if not, install it from the plugin hub. You can set hotkeys for hopping worlds. By default, it's Control, Shift, and Arrow key, but you can set it to whatever you like. So yeah, the cool thing with Zulrah is that when you log out, you appear right outside the boss area, so you can keep going right back in over and over until you get the rotation that you're looking for. The reason that this works is because by the time you see what rotation you got, you won't have been in combat yet. And if you're in combat, then you can't log out, but because nothing will have attacked you during the first phase, you will be able to log out. You won't take damage right at the start of the second phase of the other 3 rotations, but you actually do get attacked pretty much right away if you get the range rotation, so you won't be able to hop worlds in time anyways, which is all the more reason to go with the range rotation as your first one, since it's the only rotation that you can't easily log out from right away. And the odds to get a specific rotation, they're all equal, so it is a 25% chance that you'll get the one you're looking for. Like I said, it is extremely difficult to get your first kill, but when you do eventually get it once, that means you could do it again, and over time, the average number of attempts between successful kills will slowly go down. And once you're feeling confident, you can then pick a second rotation to learn. The second rotation you learn will be so much easier because you'll have already gotten a feel for switching prayers, switching gear, and running around, so it should be quicker to learn than your first one. Another benefit is because you already know one rotation, instead of having to hop 75% of the time, now you'll only have to hop 50% of the time. So while you're trying to learn the second rotation, you'll be getting even better at the first one you learned. That's the end of the main segment. The next section is going to be random tips that I want to share. The first thing is that way later on, when you're confident with the boss, you eventually will figure out certain phases that you don't need an overhead on for. There are certain phases where Zulrah is only spawning minions and poison clouds and isn't actually attacking you, like right here for example, or even some phases where Zulrah is only attacking you for half the phase, so you can save a bit of prayer that way by keeping your overhead off when you don't need it. Next tip is try to only eat between phases, because when Zulrah is underwater, you're not attacking anyways, and there's a 2-tick attack delay after eating Karabwans, or a 3-tick delay with most food. Of course, if you need to eat, you need to eat, especially when you're learning Zulrah and there's so much going on, but it's something to keep in the back of your mind as you get more and more comfortable with the boss. Next thing, which is important when learning, is switch your prayers before your gear. Having the right gear on isn't going to help you if Zulrah is smacking 41s on you because you're not praying, so always prioritize that overhead first and foremost. Plus, it's usually less clicks to switch your prayers than to switch your gear. I don't think I did the best example of showing that you should switch your prayers first because I'm so set in my ways at this point, but do as I say, not as I do. If you're learning, you're probably not going to do multiple kills per trip, so you can teleport back to the bank to resupply, but once you're more confident, you can use the teleport on the ground to put you back in Zulrah and you can run back in for the next fight. If you're a normal account, I would definitely recommend doing that, but if you're an Ironman, a lot of Irons prefer to teleport back to their POH every kill to restore their health and prayer and everything. So if you're an Ironman and you want to save supplies, that's an option too. There is a deposit chest in Zulrah. It's not a bank, you could only deposit items into your bank from there, but in case you didn't already know about it, you may find that useful later on. If you don't have the Lumbridge Elite Diary done, then you'll have to use a Drayman or a Lunar Staff to use the Fairy Ring, but the Lunar Staff is always lost on death, while the Drayman Staff is not. So I'd recommend using a Drayman Staff so you don't have to keep rebuying Lunar Staffs every time you die. If you're an Ironman doing Zulrah for the first time, you're not going to have a Serp Helm, and you're probably not going to have anti-venom pluses to stop the venom, so what you can do instead is use the Cure Me spell on the Lunar Spellbook. What this spell does is when you use it, it cures poison, or if you're venomed, it brings venom down to poison. So if you want to fully cure venom, you'd have to use it twice to bring it from venom to poison, then poison to nothing. I see a lot of Ironmen using Cure Me way more than they need to. First off, when you're at Zulrah, you never need to double cast the spell because you're being constantly venomed every attack if you aren't already venomed. The second important thing to know is that venom hits every 18 seconds. The first hit will be 6 damage, and it goes up by 2 each time. So 18 seconds later, you'll be hit for 8, 18 seconds after that, you'll be hit for 10, and so on. However, when you get revenomed, the damage always gets reset back to 6. So what I'd recommend doing is wait until you get hit for at least an 8, probably even 10, because when you get hit for 10, the next hit splat is going to be 12. You're going to be revenomed right away after you cast it, so you don't need to keep casting the spell every time you see a venom hit splat, because at that point, you're only saving 2 HP every time. It's probably not worth the runes. Also, you don't need to click on the actual spell to cast it. You can just click on your health orb, and that's part of the game, by the way. It's not a RuneLite plugin. The game always lets you click on your health orb to cure status effects as long as you have the proper items required to cure it. It is, however, RuneLite that makes it show the venom timer when you hover over your hit points. You may notice I'm using a Slayer Helm right now. That's not because I'm on a Slayer task, it's because the imbued Slayer Helm actually has decent hybrid stats for both mage and range accuracy. It's +3 for both. And when you're learning, you want to minimize your switches as much as possible. And honestly, you can just camp the accumulator if you want to save ammo and just switch your weapon top and bottom so that you only have a 3-way switch. Having less gear to switch when you're learning can make a huge difference. Having less switches makes you less likely to get flustered, especially considering you have to switch gear pretty often, and with everything else going on, I believe that having a lower chance to get flustered as you're learning way more than outweighs having slightly more DPS from an extra switch or two. Although if you're using Carol's crossbow, the ammo always gets destroyed when you use it, so you don't need an accumulator and you can camp the mage cape instead. Mage is the more important combat style for the Zulrah fight, since it's what you're going to be attacking with the most, but I mentioned the Ava's device because as an Ironman, you'd probably rather save the ranged ammo if you are only going to pick one cape. If you're an Ironman but aren't using Cure Me, but you don't have SERP or anti-venom pluses yet, you can also bring anti-poisons, which do the same thing as Cure Me. One dose will bring venom down to poison. You can buy them at the Karamja shop or in Sophanem, and you should be fine bringing 2 4-dose anti-poisons with you to Zulrah. This could be useful maybe if you wanted to use Thralls and you'd have to be on the Archaea spellbook. Let's rewind back to that last Zulrah fight. I have a tip for the Jad phase. The way I remember which prayer to start with is if the Jad phase is on the right side, I start with the prayer that's also on the right side. If Jad phase is on the left side, then I start with the left prayer, meaning start with pray range when Jad phase is on the right, and start with pray mage when Jad phase is on the left. If you're playing a normal account and you have the funds, I would highly recommend learning Zulrah with the Bofa, or T-bow or Shadow if you can afford them, but using any one of those things will allow you to camp one combat style the whole fight, and it lets you take switching gear out of the equation. Also, as a normal account, you definitely want to be using anti-venom pluses, or at least a SERP helm, so you can take venom out of the equation too. And by equation, I mean the list of things that might get you flustered while you learn. Another privilege you have as a GE user is being able to buy a Ring of Suffering so that you can charge it up with recoils and not have to worry about switching into a Ring of Recoil each time one breaks. So as you can see, a normal account does have a lot of potential advantages to making the learning process as easy as possible, but if you're an Ironman, don't let any of that discourage you, because after you try Zulrah for a bit, it's pretty quick to get used to all those things, and I think you'll find that those things are more so minor conveniences and not massive game changers. There is a plugin called Ring of Recoil Notifier that will help you with the recoils. Another Ironman tip, which may help some normal accounts too, is that for those of you that don't have the Ornate Pool in the POH, you can use the Ring of Dueling to teleport to Ferox Enclave after the kill, and there's a pool there you can drink from to restore everything. And then there's also a bank chest right next to it that you can use to resupply. One more thing to remember is that Zulrah's max hit is 41, so especially if Zulrah's in the mage phase, always keep your health above 41 or even higher because of snakelings. But once you are more confident, you can combo eat when you see a range hit coming at you, and you could stay lower health if you want. So I think that's all the things I want to mention about Zulrah. This is by no means everything about Zulrah, but just some of the tips that I had that I wanted to share. If you only care about getting the one kill for the diary, then obviously a video called How to Learn Zulrah isn't for you if you're not trying to learn Zulrah and you only want to do one kill. But if that is you, then I would suggest looking up guides for the mage only method. It'll be a long kill, but it'll get the job done for 1 KC. And really, anyone can brute force their way through a kill if you bring like 20 brews with you. And the final thing I need to mention, which is true with any boss, is that you cannot learn a boss just by watching guides. You need to actually go in and try fighting the boss, which is extra true here since Zulrah really is all about repetition and muscle memory. A lot of the time, guides won't make sense until you try the boss a bit. So you can skim through a guide, but then try the boss a couple times, then go back to the guide and it'll make more sense then. Then you can go in for a few more kills, go back to the guide again, and once again, it'll make even more sense, and keep on repeating that over and over, and then everything in the guide will be crystal clear to you. So if you haven't even tried the boss yet, just go in and try. You don't risk anything when you die because deaths are free at Zulrah until you get to 50 KC. It's an extremely difficult boss fight to learn, and if you're getting upset, it's okay to take breaks. You can always come back later or another day with a fresh start and a cool head. Everyone who's ever learned Zulrah had to go through the same learning process that you're going through. Some people might get it faster or slower than others, but just know that your frustration is valid. As long as you keep trying and going for it, you will eventually get it. There is a bright light at the end of the tunnel, and no matter how dark it seems right now, you can do it.